当代基督徒学者中，对于基督教与美国近代文化的互动具有深入研究的历史学家当属乔治·马斯登。他的研究著作尤其揭示了基督教与文化的互动对美国的高等教育和福音运动所形成的影响。如果我们想要思考文化与基督的关系，我们就不能错过乔治·马斯登的2本历史著作《约拿丹·爱德华兹的一生》和《路易斯传：返璞归真的基督教》。历史是一张明灯，研究教会历史可以帮助我们能更好地理解今天教会的挑战与传福音的机遇。
I'm probably best known as a historian of American religion, particularly American evangelicalism and fundamentalism. Well, I have had a sense of calling for a long time to try to understand the interactions of Christianity and culture, particularly in American culture, to see how the church got to be the way it is, the influences it's had on the culture, and the ways in which the culture reshapes the church. Early on, I was wrestling with these sorts of issues of the interaction of American religion and culture, partly because I went to a largely secular undergraduate college, and I had a very strong religious upbringing, and so I was trying to relate the two. When I first came to Calvin College to teach in the 1960s, there was a wonderful faculty there too, and I had colleagues that helped set the agenda for us working together collectively, not just as an individual thing, and that was very helpful to have people to work with, like Alvin Plantinga, Nicholas Waltersdorf, and quite a few others who were equally helpful. A number of other Christian philosophers were there, and I was the token historian in the group, and so I learned a lot of philosophy from them at that time.
每个人都有自己的世界观，学者也不例外。基督徒学者无需因为自己的立场而有任何不适。马斯登指出，只要保持应有的谦卑，带着求真求实的态度来研究历史，回应时代就可以。
I've long thought about and advocated trying to relate my faith to my scholarship, and that's one of the things I learned early on, that it makes sense that everyone has a perspective, and so if you have a Christian perspective, it makes sense to try to relate your Christian perspective to everything that you do, and that doesn't make you any different from someone that has a secular perspective or an ideological-based perspective. And then in trying to understand the role of the church in American culture particularly, it's, I think, important to not be simply partisan. And when Butterfield talks, for instance, about the Whig interpretation of history, what he has in mind is sort of the people who are the winners celebrate all the progress that they've made. But I think it's, particularly for Christians who are historians or other kinds of scholars, I think it's good to also show humility about your own tradition and to understand that things often go wrong. Then, as far as relationship, understanding God's providence in all that, it seems to me one of the people whom I respect on the topic, Richard Lovelace, who taught at Gordon Conwell Seminary, said that doing Christian history is like looking at a football game where half the players are hidden. And so you know God is acting, but you don't know, all you see is other actors. And you don't know exactly what the interactions between God and these other actors is.
对于为何与爱德华兹结下不解之缘，乔治·马斯登说，是因为爱德华兹独特的对上帝之爱的领悟与表述吸引了他。
I was long interested in Jonathan Edwards. I grew up in a Reformed Presbyterian background and with a lot of theological emphasis. And then I discovered Jonathan Edwards largely when I was in graduate school, more than when I was in seminary, and he was very highly regarded by the more liberal Christian and even some secular historians just because of his intellectual strength and prowess. And I started reading Edwards, and I found a dynamic of his expression of Christianity as an outgrowth of the love of God as sort of the reason why there is a universe at all. The reason we have a universe is it's called the Big Bang of the love of God radiating through reality, and then the center of reality is, do we respond to that love or beauty or not? And that, for me, was helpful theological dynamic that I've been reared on. A lot of doctrine, talking about the sovereignty of God and principles, but Edwards made it come alive in certain ways. And so I was very interested in that. And then the opportunity came to write this biography in honor of his 300th anniversary of his birth. And so that it just fit with my interests, and I found it totally fascinating to try to figure out how this person lived in 18th century colonial America, which was sort of the frontier and the Wild West of that time. It was a time when there was a lot of conflict between the British and the French, and then the Indians who were being displaced, and what all those relationships were made the whole thing quite fascinating.
在爱德华兹的传记获得巨大反响之后，马斯登又将目光对准了另一位20世纪最重要的基督徒作家和文化学者路易斯。
After I was done with Edwards, I was looking around for someone to study who would be equally edifying. That I found working with Edwards every day for quite a few years, that was very helpful to me. There's a lot of integrity. And then the opportunity arose to contribute to a series Princeton Press did called The Lives of Great Religious Books. And they asked me if I wanted to do something. And it occurred to me, well, C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity is a book that is still very much a vital book, and it would be very interesting to write about that, and it would be well-deserved to be in that series. So I'd never worked on Lewis before, but it was a wonderful opportunity to read everything of Lewis and a lot about Lewis, and be edified just by someone who's a very wise Christian guide, and much more down to earth than Edwards, but a good compliment to Edwards. That Edwards did the high theology, and Lewis thinks about the common sense ways this relates to everyday life. I see the purpose of particularly the Lewis work is trying to communicate to other Christians what is it in Lewis that's really valuable, and what should they notice, and so if it's edifying for me, then how can I relay that to an audience and communicate that to an audience?
对于中国乃至今天许多信奉科学实证和存在主义的人，基督教被贴上宗教、落后、迷信的标签。作为基督徒学者，马斯登指出，基督教学术研究需要发出声音。
One thing is to push back against the prejudice that religious views are backward or out of date, and I think Alvin Plantinga and Waltersdorf and so forth, people who have shown that religious points of view are just as intellectually legitimate as other points of view. So I think there's a strong argument for the legitimacy of Christian scholarship. Then I don't know the Chinese situation. You do need institutions or supporting networks of people to work with, and for me it's been very important to be a lot of my intellectual shaping, as I said, took place at Calvin College and in a community of scholars. And then there's also these days a network that you don't have to be physically in the same place to have a network of like-thinking people that you can support and be supported by. So I think it's very important to build those sorts of networks and organizations and institutions, if you can, to try to build Christian scholarship. And then I think there are also, it's important for all of us these days to see it as an international project, that it's not, it's not, we can learn from Chinese can learn from other people, and there are a lot of, like, Christianity is a worldwide religion, global Christianity, and there's all sorts of resources to learn from, to see yourself not in just a little parochial group, but you're connected to people all over the world. I see the strengths and the weaknesses of the church in our time are very closely related. And the Protestant church, and particularly evangelicalism, is very adaptable to all sorts of cultural settings, and that's wonderful, and it's a source of growth and the reason why it can manage in China in very different circumstances from what we have here. But it also leads to a sort of, in this country particularly, a sort of market-driven dimension where whatever works is what people go to, and so rather than having good leadership sort of stepping back and saying, here's where we should be going, we're going where it's easiest to go very often. And so I see partly the role of scholars is to try to get a voice in saying, how can we be more thoughtful in the directions that we're going.
作为拥有悠久历史和独特文化的中国，基督教在中国走过的发展之路，同样让马斯登感慨和敬畏。
I think there's a need for historians of China's, Christianity in China. There is a remarkable history of Christianity in China, and to figure out how that all happened in relation to the Chinese situation and what makes Chinese Christianity unique, and what needs to be done, and how do you understand different manifestations of it. All those things are tasks that scholars can pick up, and so it's a different cultural situation than I've experienced, but it's the same kinds of questions. How's God working in this peculiar cultural setting in sometimes very troubling times? But there are you need some people who step back and take and have some perspective to offer to everybody. You have to, first of all, admire people who are willing to go to other parts of the world to be missionaries, and then, as you know, the impact on other cultures is sometimes a mix, And I think that's probably always been an issue in Chinese culture, that you have a very sophisticated culture, and then you have Westerners who came there thinking, okay, we can improve these people. And I think the one thing I know about history of missions is the better people are the missionaries are at some point stepping back and putting it in the hands of the people, the people on the scene, and the native people who are native to the region. The better missions go. So again, I think intellectual humility is one of the dimensions of what we should be doing that has to be matched with some sort of intellectual confidence in being grounded in what you believe. But I think the two are complementary from a Christian perspective, and I think that's one way in which Christian perspectives differ from a lot of ideologically based perspectives, which tend to be absolutist and simply celebrate their own tradition and denigrate everybody else. There are, I think, for anyone who is thoughtful, you're constantly negotiating with challenges to your faith to some degree, but I think also you can have a confidence that if you trust in God, that's the best you can do, and hope that that's the right thing to be doing.